Glad to have you guys along for another newspaper reading. My name is Henry Chap. Before we get started with today's Chicago Tribune, let me just give you a reminder that you can find World War II radio programs that correspond with this date in radio broadcasting, the date you are about to hear in the newspaper on my other channel, the World War II radio channel. Go check it out, and you will have usually a lengthy upload of old-time radio programs from this specific date. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Friday, December 27th, 1940. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:17 a.m. It set at 4:25 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, cloudy Friday, Saturday, partly cloudy, little change in temperature, fresh north to northeast winds on Friday. The low temperature, 36 degrees. The high temperature, 49. Today's headline, Hitler at Invasion Front. Berlin, December 26th. Adolf Hitler made a Christmas tour along the North French coastal front and extended his visit through today, DNB, the official German news agency, disclosed tonight. He was in Boulogne yesterday. He visited units of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and also of the organization TOT, engineering units named for the engineer who directed the building of the German West Wall. These units now are said to be installing more heavy batteries along the English Channel coast. Hitler told his soldiers, DNB said, that the watchword for the new year is, "Before us lies the freedom and future of our folks, behind us lie past experiences, and in us lies the unswervable decision that out of this war shall come a better and more beautiful Germany." The coastal batteries, which he visited, had their muzzles turned toward England. But the presence of both Hitler and Field Marshal Walter von Brüsch, the German commander-in-chief, at the front does not mean an immediate attempt to invade England, authorized sources said. They remarked that both were at the German West Wall, Siegfried Line, last Christmas, but that no attacks in that sector took place then. London, December 27th. The Royal Air Force ended the unofficial Christmas bombing truce during the night, reliable sources said today, with an attack on German-occupied territory across the English Channel from England. On the defensive side in the air war, there was a night-long lull. Budapest, Hungary, December 26th. Concentration of Russian forces along the Romanian frontier was reported underway today as Germany poured the initial units of 300,000 fresh troops into Romania and ordered a speed up in the Balkan kingdom's production of war materials. A spurt of diplomatic activity in the southeastern European capitals accompanied this military activity, believed by some observers to presage a possible showdown between powers with conflicting interests in the Balkans. The Russian concentrations were reported along the Prut River, which became the dividing line between Romania and the Soviet Union after Moscow obtained Bessarabia and northern Bukovina from the Bucharest government by ultimatum last June 27th. German troops moved across Hungary in special trains with artillery, bridge-building equipment, tanks, and other motorized vehicles. Other dispatches from Berlin said authoritative quarters there had described reports of German troop concentrations in Romania as laughable. Under the German-ordered speed-up in Romania's war production, 2 large Romanian industrial plants will be devoted to the manufacture of warplanes for Germany, diplomatic dispatches from Bucharest said. A submarine building yard already in operation at Galati, these advices added, has been ordered to increase its production. All this German military activity coincided with the shift of Baron Manfred von Killinger, Nazi minister to Slovakia, to the same post at Bucharest. He is prepared to rule Romania as Adolf Hitler's virtual Gauleiter or district leader, informed sources asserted. He formerly was consul general in San Francisco. Bucharest, Romania, December 26th. With Romanian railways carrying especially heavy German military traffic, 7 persons were killed and scores injured today when two passenger train collisions. One occurred near Bucharest, the other near Timisoara. Police started investigations suspecting sabotage. German military trains are moving into the country from Hungary in great numbers. Moscow, December 26th. Reports of a mysterious fire at the Bucharest airport and mounting death rate among children of Romania appeared in the Russian press today. The government organ Izvestia said the airport fire was being investigated by Romanian officials. Pravda said 4 of every 10 children in Romania were dying of tuberculosis and malnutrition, and in a like vein, Izvestia published a survey purporting to show extreme poverty and suffering among Romanian peasants. The army newspaper Red Star interpreted the formation of a German-Italian-Japanese mixed commission to execute terms of the Axis Triple Alliance as a reply to the new Roosevelt plan for aid to England. Bitolj, Yugoslavia, December 26th. Greek patrols have entered the village of Lin on Lake Otrida, 15 miles north of Pogradec, on the road to Elbasan, according to reports reaching this town near the Albanian frontier. Military informants said the capture of Lin, which the Italians defended stubbornly, would open the way for Greek columns to push northwestward to attempt a flanking move against Elbasan, only 30 miles from Tirana, the Albanian capital. With the British forces outside Bardia, Libya, December 26th. The Italian Air Force concentrated its activity in the Bardia region today in an attempt to impede the British land forces surrounding this Libyan outpost. The British Air Force continued to bomb Libyan airfields in order to keep the Italians on the ground as much as possible. All indications point to a real British drive to be opened soon on the estimated 20,000 Italians who are besieged in Bardia. Rome, December 26th. The United States was given credit for the British victory over the Italians in North Africa today by the Italian news weekly Tempo. The article said the war had become a conflict between all Europe and the Anglo-Saxon world in which England continued to exist only because America was supporting her. In this world, said Tempo, there exists materially only North America, not England, which lives and fights only because the United States makes it possible. The latest proof is the North African offensive, made possible only by the American neutrality, which furnished tanks, airplanes, ammunition, and artillery. Rome, December 26th. Italian troops battling on the Albanian front were reported officially today to have beaten back Greek assaults in several sectors, inflicting considerable losses on the attackers and taking a number of prisoners. At the same time, the Italian High Command said fascist warplanes bombed Greek naval bases and enemy harbor installations. Athens, December 26th. Italy's war against Greece has cost the fascists 45,000 men and wounded alone since the campaign began on October 28th, captured Italian officers estimated tonight as the Greeks thrust ahead through mud and snow north and northwest of Chimera, Albania. The officers, talking to correspondents at the front, made no estimate of the Italian dead, but said the toll was extremely high. The fighting today was described by the Greeks as of a local nature, but the battle for Tepelini and Kilsura in the central sector continued. The Greek spokesman said that north and northwest of Chimera, Italian troops suffered another defeat. London, December 26th. Italy lost at least 39 airplanes to 9 British losses in operations in the Greek-Italian conflict from November 7th to December 21st, the Air Ministry News Service reported today, in giving details of Royal Air Force activities in support of the Greeks. Algeciras, Spain, December 26th. A number of British troops at Gibraltar were taken ill the last few days as a result of drinking what was asserted to be contaminated liquor bought in Gibraltar bars, it was learned today. Military authorities have notified bar owners they will be fined £20 or about $80 or given a month in jail if any more soldiers become ill from drinking. Rome, December 26th. The Italian High Command today claimed successes on sea and land against the British. Submarines operating in the Mediterranean and Atlantic Ocean, a communique said, sank a light British cruiser and two large steamers, the last two in the Atlantic, where another vessel was declared struck by a torpedo. Amid heavy artillery exchanges and air bombing by Italian flyers, land forces of the fascists were reported to have repelled British assaults on the desert post near Bardia in Libya. Italian bombers also were reported to have scored hits on a British warship along the North African coast. Panama City, Panama, December 26th. A tiny Greek freighter, the Castor, gave the giant Italian luxury liner, the Conte Biancamino, a Christmas raspberry yesterday afternoon when the former arrived from the sea and anchored in Cristobal Harbor. The Biancamino has been here ever since Italy entered the war last spring. With the whole expanse of Limon Bay wherein to heave her hook, the 3,425-ton Greek vessel chose the spot nearest to the 23,000-ton Italian craft. Then all but one of the Greek crew lined the rails while that exception was unfurling a Greek flag almost as long as the ship herself. The Biancamino skipper ordered the hoisting of the largest Italian flag on board. The crew of the Castor gave the Italians the Greek version of the Merry Ha Ha. London, December 26th. Heavily armed guards along the Channel coast were doubled today as Christmas brought perfect invasion weather to the Strait of Dover. Special precautions were taken against the possibility of a lightning German thrust through the blanket of mist over the calm sea. Special patrols of picked troops armed with Bren and other automatic weapons patrolled the beaches. Every cleft and fissure of the white cliffs above was watched. Coastal traffic was halted and searched at barricades. Drivers and their passengers, whether civilians or members of the fighting forces, had to produce identification cards. These precautions not only were regarded as necessary because of the ideal invasion weather, but also because of the pronouncement of Field Marshal Walter von Breusch, German Commander-in-Chief, in his Christmas message to German troops, in which he said, "Today I speak to you before a wall of water which protects England so long as it suits us." The precautions also followed what had been an unofficial Christmas aviation truce in which more than 48 hours neither German nor British bombs had been dropped on England or Germany. The view taken here is that because of the weather, the Germans and the British decided to rest their bomber crews who had been continually engaged for months. For Britain, the day was one of an uneasy peace. Bombs, the first since early Monday morning, fell only once during the day on the Isle of Sheppey in the Thames estuary. The government said there was little damage. Key men in the British arms factories utilized the Christmas Day recess from operations and bombing to do their vital repair and maintenance work on machines, and the supply ministry announced. It added that at one arms factory, which the Germans reported had been bombed to bits, the workers went on with their jobs after every pane of glass had been blown from the skylights. Studies of Germany's tactical situation, her equipment, and war psychology made by Army Staff College graduates here indicate that if the Nazis still are intent upon a serious attempt to invade England, it must be made by their air forces primarily. And the students, who must remain unidentified, estimate that Germany's entire air fleets could dump a strong force of men, more than 500,000, into England within a fortnight. Such an assault necessarily would be a maximum effort with the last airplane, the last man, and the last mechanical weapon in Germany's war machine behind it. Obviously, it would be a tremendous gamble, one on which the ultimate course of the entire war, well, might hinge. But this is the sort of gamble German commanders took on smaller scales in the Battle of France, and it is the type of bold stroke that German leaders love. London, December 26th. The 1,350-ton British destroyer Acheron has been sunk, the Admiralty announced tonight. No details of the action, its date, or the number of casualties from the vessel's normal complement of 138 officers and men were given. The warship, built in 1930 and was equipped with extraordinarily high pressure boilers, was capable of 35 knots. On a trial run, the Acheron established a record of fuel economy. Her boiler pressure of 500 pounds per square inch was said then to be 66% greater than anything previously attained. The Acheron was the 36th British destroyer officially acknowledged to have been lost in the war. New York, December 26th. The British freighter Whale Tira 12,823-ton refrigerated ship radioed today that she has been torpedoed about 400 miles northwest of the Irish coast. She was the third large food ship reported torpedoed in the last 10 days. McKay Radio picked up this message from the vessel. Torpedoed in 58.12 north latitude, 17.25 west longitude. The Whale Tira had been carrying beef from Australia to England. She was completed last year at Belfast and was one of the finest ships of her type. The 12,196-ton Napier Star and the Orrery 10,350 tons, both food ships vital to England, were torpedoed recently in submarine attacks on British convoys. Refrigerated ships are expensive and not too numerous. In East Coast Canadian port, December 26th. The torpedo sinking of the 5,378-ton British freighter Irregularities in the Atlantic December 1st was disclosed today by 15 surviving crewmen reaching this port. Nothing has been heard from 49 other members of the crew, last seen in 3 lifeboats. The rescued men said the ship was sunk 700 miles west of Ireland by a submarine. The 16-year-old Erakataka had been carrying munitions from Bayonne, New Jersey to England. Mexico City, December 26th. Sources in the Navy Department here said tonight 1 German and 9 Italian ships now at refuge in Tampico Harbor were under close watch by port authorities in the belief that they would soon attempt a dash into the Atlantic. Waterfront sources in Tampico said officers and crew members of the ships were bidding farewell to friends and that 2 Italian ships had been moved to anchorages near the mouth of the Panuco River. No application for clearance papers has been made by any of the vessels. Shanghai, December 27th. Japanese forces are mopping up guerrillas in 3 widely separated areas in China despite intense cold weather, Domai, the Japanese news agency, reported today. It said the largest operations were in western Shanxi province, where the Japanese land and air assaults drove 15,000 Chinese from a base at Miketian and destroyed military establishments. North of the Yangtze River, it said, the Japanese dispersed 1,000 guerrillas who have been molesting the Tientsin-Nanking Railway. Bangkok, Thailand, December 26th. The Thai Siamese High Command today reported Thai guns had sunk 2 Mekong River troop transports on Christmas Day in hostilities between Thailand and French Indochina. The boats were sunk after French guns shelled the vicinity of Thak Hek, the communique said. Hanoi, French Indochina, December 26th. Sharp hostilities along the frontier of Thailand and Indochina marked the Christmas period of Southeast Asia's undeclared war. The fighting was the heaviest in the last fortnight, French sources said today. New York, December 26th. Charles Halliard, Belgian Consul General announced today that his government in London has issued a call to arms for all Belgians between the ages of 19 to 25 who are living in countries not occupied by the Germans. The decree, said Halliert, affected all Belgians born between January 1st, 1915 and December 31st, 1921. Volunteers between the ages of 16 and 36 also would be accepted. Armed Belgian units are now being formed in England to fight side by side with the British and Allied armies. Halliert said the decree announced Belgians in countries non-occupied by the German army are affected by this decree and should at once consult their nearest consul regarding their present military status. London, December 26th. The Admiralty tonight announced the appointment of Admiral Sir H.D. Cunningham as a Lord Commissioner or Executive Officer of the Admiralty and Chief of Supplies and Transport, effective April 1st. Cunningham, who now holds a sea appointment, will succeed Vice Admiral Geoffrey S. Arbuthnot, who will go to the East Indies as Commander-in-Chief of Naval Forces, replacing Admiral Ralph Leatham. London, December 26th. Sir Walter Thomas Layton, British journalist, economist, now attached to the Ministry of Supply, holds his countrymen frankly today they must not expect an avalanche of war material from the United States until next winter. Back from his supply mission to the United States, he told a press conference that Americans did not fully realize the scale of rearmament necessary for the defeat of Germany, and as yet no orders have been placed on the scale ultimately required for victory. However, he expressed confidence that if we hold on through 1941, American war supplies would make their full weight felt late in the year. This, he said, is a certainty because of ultimate victory. Don't expect a miracle from the United States, the economist warned. American War Department orders were placed between July and October of this year, he said, and it will take a long time for these and Britain's own orders to mature. Vichy France, December 26th. Navy Minister Jean Darlan returned today from Paris, where it is believed he told German authorities how collaboration with France might continue. Darlan, who appears to have taken over Pierre Laval's place as negotiator with Germany, conferred with Chief of State Henri Pétain, Defense Minister General Charles Hutzinger, Interior Minister Marcel Pérutin, and Finance Minister Marcel Bruthler. Darlan went to Paris Christmas Eve on an undefined government mission. Informed quarters said they believed Darlan had presented Pétain's stand that if the chief of state ever crosses the demarcation line between occupied and unoccupied France, he will go also as chief of government. That is important since the chief of state is considered to be without actual governing powers. It is as chief of government and first officer of the cabinet that Marshal Pétain exercises dictatorial power over unoccupied France. Vichy France, December 26th. Rumors reach here of the possibility of intervention or of negotiation to end the war, with particular reference to the conflict between Britain and Italy. The rumors come from several sources. There is interest, for instance, in United States Senator Millard R. Tyding's suggestion that the belligerents should be asked on what conditions they would prepare to end hostilities. There is also the trip to North Africa of Robert Murphy, American charge d'affaires here, ostensibly to inspect consulates. It is pointed out that North Africa is not very distant from some points in Italy. Washington, D.C., December 26th. British talks begun by the late Lord Lothian with Secretary of State Cordell Hull on mutual defense problems in the Pacific will be carried on for some time by the Australian Minister Richard G. Casey, it was indicated tonight. Casey's past participation in many of these informal conversations, informed sources said, made him a link for maintaining their continuity without serious interruption by the death of Lord Lothian, British ambassador. The new British envoy, Lord Halifax, will come to the United States early in the new year with an intimate knowledge of the talks gained from Lord Lothian's reports to him as Foreign Secretary. For some time after his arrival, however, Lord Halifax is expected to be absorbed chiefly with problems connected with American aid to Britain and questions of European diplomacy, thus leaving to Casey the main task of keeping up the Pacific talks with Secretary Hull. Japan's formal alliance with Germany and Italy placed new emphasis on Pacific defense problems for both Great Britain and the United States. New York, December 26th. The Dixie Clipper took off today for Lisbon, Portugal with 50 pounds or 11,000 units of diphtheria antitoxin and 14 pounds or 7,000 shots of diphtheria toxoid, the former addressed to United States Ambassador Alexander W. Weddell in Spain and the latter to the British Red Cross in London. Both shipments were sent by the American Red Cross and were carried free of charge on the Clipper. Shanghai, China, December 27th. United States Marine officers today denied unconfirmed reports carried in all Shanghai newspapers that an Italian Marine was killed in a Christmas Eve cabaret brawl between Italians and American Marines and sailors. The officers also denied that Italian authorities had officially apologized, but said they had expressed regrets for the incident in which 9 American Marines and 3 sailors were listed as slightly injured. The Italians refused to say how many Italian Marines were injured, but the newspapers reported 20 were battered. The fight, said to have originated in a dispute over a table, was stopped by military police. Tokyo, December 27th. Nichi today quoted reliable sources as saying the United States government had been urged to advise American residents in Japan to leave not later than January 31st. The newspaper cited in this connection an increase in the number of scheduled calls by American vessels at Japanese ports during January. It said the American President liners Taft, Coolidge, Cleveland, and Pierce are due during January in contrast to the decrease in calls of recent months when most American ships to the Orient went direct to Shanghai or Manila without touching Japanese ports. The newspaper also said the United States was being urged to extend its economic pressure on Japan by forbidding all American vessels to stop here after February 1st. In New York, a British wireless broadcast quoted the Japanese Times, English-language newspaper in Tokyo, as saying there may be a complete closing down of Far Eastern markets to American imports as a reprisal for American restrictions on Japanese imports. Mexico City, December 26th. The United States War and Navy departments have opened negotiations to incorporate Pan American Airways' far-flung network of airports into the Continental Defense Plan's responsible sources reported here tonight. These negotiations embrace not only Pan American's facilities in Mexico, from which squadrons of warplanes could operate to defend the immediate coastlines of the United States in both oceans, but the company's fields and equipment throughout Central and South America. As reported here, Washington contemplates investing millions of dollars jointly with Pan American in the construction of hard surface runways, extension of existing runways, construction of underground fuel storage tanks, and enlargement of hangar space. The outlay for the company's Mexican fields would entail between $5 million and $10 million, it was estimated. Work, it was said, will begin as soon as possible here and elsewhere. Washington, D.C., December 26th. President Roosevelt will propose shortly, an authoritative source said tonight, that the United States construct a great number of merchant ships at high speed to offset the heavy inroads made by Nazi planes and submarines on Britain's lifeline. The reported program is reminiscent of the one under which ships were built in record time during the World War. Details were not disclosed, but a reliable informant said the program would be extensive and that it would fit into the plan which Mr. Roosevelt has discussed for leasing or lending equipment and supplies to the besieged country. To avoid a bottleneck in marine engine production, this source continued, reciprocating engines would be used in the ships instead of turbo-electric equipment. The reason given for this was that some unused facilities for the production of reciprocating engines were available, whereas plants to turn out the more modern equipment were loaded with work and could not be expanded quickly. It was not disclosed whether the proposed ships would themselves be made available to Britain or vessels now coming off the ways for the American merchant marine would be released to the British and replaced in this country's fleet with the subsequent production. London, December 26th. Millions of British workers in offices, factories, and the public services went back to work today after their one-day Christmas holiday, the first time since the passing of the Bank Holiday Act in 1871 that Boxing Day was not observed as a general holiday. War factories were running at full speed and other industries responded to the government's appeal to carry on with their work. Boxing Day, the first weekday after Christmas, is a legal holiday in which Christmas boxes are given to postmen, etc. Even the City of London broke the tradition. Afternoon newspapers appeared as usual, the stock exchange was open, and insurance companies and stores were operating. The Billingsgate Fish Market was open for the first time on Boxing Day. London, December 26th. The Ministry of Food today announced control of trade prices for cereals and breakfast foods beginning January 1st. Prices will be fixed at those prevailing on December 2nd. The order also provides that after January 24th, no persons will be permitted to manufacture, produce, or packet cereal or breakfast foods except under license. London, December 26th. Britain's meat ration is likely to be reduced from that purchasable for 1 shilling 10 pence, about 37 cents per week, to purchases of 1 shilling 6 pence, about 30 cents per week, per person early in January, it was reported reliably today. Britain rations meat by price rather than weight. The 1 shilling 10 pence allowance brought about 1.5 pounds of beef. Pork, tripe, kidneys, liver, and sausages were here to throw have not been rationed, now may be part of the ration. Members of the fighting services who until now have enjoyed larger rations are expected to take a cut in proportion to that given the civilian population. London, December 26th. The first contingent of Australian airmen to complete training in Canada under the Empire scheme have arrived in London. They will be posted with Royal Air Force squadrons, but will retain their Australian identity. In East Coast Canadian port, December 26th. 1 seaman burned to death and 7 were injured in a fire which leveled 3 wooden Navy barracks buildings early today. The fire spread so rapidly that many seamen had difficulty making their way to safety. Several of the last to leave said they had seen a number of men still asleep in their hammocks. Somewhere in England, December 26th, a new contingent of Canadian troops, the 8th large one to cross the Atlantic since the outbreak of war, arrived in their camp here today after landing in a port on the west coast of England. Tokyo, December 27th. Mass training of girls desiring to become brides of immigrants to Manchukuo is scheduled to begin soon under direction of the Japanese-German Women's Association. The Overseas Ministry has granted permission for construction of a $60,000 school at Oruki outside Tokyo. 500 girls annually are expected to graduate from the new 3-month course in housekeeping and farming. Madrid, Spain, December 26th. Luis Font Aguilar, a Spanish boy who was carried out of Spain with the retreating Republicans in May 1939, threatened today to become the cause of a minor international incident involving Spain and Belgium. Louis was adopted by a childless Belgian couple who found him lying ill and abandoned in a Liege hospital. Recently, his family, living in Barcelona, learned where he was and demanded his return. The Belgian couple replied they have grown attached to the boy whose life they saved and accused his parents of having abandoned him. The boy's father made public his reply, denying the boy was abandoned and asserting he was carried off by retreating Red militiamen. Spanish diplomatic authorities in Brussels and an official organization for the repatriation of Spanish children have been asked to intervene with the Belgian government. Berlin, December 26th. P.G. Wodehouse, the imperturbable creator of the exemplified Jeeves, is cheerfully writing a book about the American crooks these days in a room in a German civilian internment camp that once was the padded cell of a madhouse. The author's companions are truck drivers, coal heavers, Cambridge graduates, artists, some of British consuls, an assortment of Britons picked up by the Nazis on the way from Brest, Litovsk, Poland to the English Channel, and from Kirkenes, Norway to the Brenner Pass. Wodehouse was arrested and occupied France at his villa in Le Touquet on the Channel during the German offensive last May. When I arrived at the Silesian camp, where he and 1,100 other British subjects are held inside double barbed wire fences, the camp commander ordered the novelist brought to his office for an interview. Wodehouse came in smiling, pulled a battered old cap from his shining head, stretched out a hand and said, "Well, my, it's certainly grand of you to come down here to see me." He was wearing a long, heavy tan bathrobe held together with a leather belt, a blue turtleneck sweater, a tweed sports jacket, trousers, and knit gloves. "Coming over here to East Germany came as an absolute blow to me," he said. "It all happened so quickly, that I really didn't have a chance to leave France. Really, before I could do anything, the war was over for me. By the end of May, the whole thing was settled in my territory." In July, he was sent with other British prisoners to Luz, France, where, he said, the French police treated them as criminals, and allowed them outside a cell only 1 hour in 24. But the German commander came to inspect, the author related, and went through that place like an east wind. He raised hell. Soon the prisoners were transferred to Belgium and then to the present camp, which formerly was an insane asylum. The prisoners, Wodehouse said, have reveille at 6 a.m., have breakfast and roll call at 9 a.m. After that, they can see the doctor and are free to pursue their chosen activity until lunchtime, since as civilians, they are not required to work. Wodehouse refused to accept special housing privileges and lives in a room with 60 other internees. His dormitory is lighted only by unshaded bulbs, and in the twilight, many of the internees look far from their best. He claimed the early-to-bed schedule was giving me health I never achieved in private life. He said he was becoming a great admirer of the German potato. Bejucal, Cuba, December 26th. At least 15 persons were killed and 100 injured tonight when a tornado, the first in the history of Havana province, razed a score of buildings, including a 3-story theater, the city hospital, a church, a convent, several stores, and a large number of homes. From beneath the debris could be heard voices of persons crying for help, while squads of men worked frantically trying to rescue them. The tornado broke the telephone and telegraph lines and the light system, making communication with Havana and adjacent towns impossible. After an hour's work in the darkness, firemen, police, and soldiers restored the lines and were able to summon aid. The town was placed under martial law. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, December 26th. Torrential rains lasting 4 days and swelling the waters of Paraibuna River have flooded vast areas and half-submerged Juiz de Fora Industrial Center in Minas Gerais state. The floods have caused a number of deaths, made 5,000 persons homeless, and resulted in damage estimated at $5 million. The waters began receding today. Government inspectors have found 4 textile mills partly destroyed and several silk manufacturing plants completely wrecked. Juiz de Fora lacks bread, milk, meat, and vegetables. Vaccine and medicines have been rushed by plane to the city. Buenos Aires, December 26th. Travelers arriving here today from Asunción, Paraguay, said that on Christmas morning the Paraguayan military government began rounding up and imprisoning members of the Liberal Party on charges they had plotted to overthrow the regime. They said 180 were in jail awaiting transfer to a concentration camp. The travelers said young military officers were directing activities of the government headed by General Eugenio Moringo, who took full government powers into his hands last month. The Liberal Party was in power for many years. Hey guys, if you are fascinated by the 1930s and 1940s and love this newspaper channel, maybe you would like my other channel, the World War II radio channel. There we play radio broadcasts from a specific date. I think you will enjoy that channel if you love this one, and don't forget to subscribe to it. And now for national news. Washington, D.C., December 26th. The United States should address an inquiry to all the nations at war in an effort to ascertain if there is not a rational basis for a negotiated peace, Senator Arthur H. Vandenberg, Republican, Michigan, asserted today. At the same time, Representative Roy O. Woodruff, Republican, Michigan, speaking in the House, assailed President Roosevelt's plan to seize German, Italian, and other European ships and turned in American ports and turned them over to the British. The two statements illustrated a growing sentiment in Congress for some action seeking an end to the war before this nation is hopelessly involved and for refraining meanwhile from actions which go far beyond methods short of war in aiding Great Britain. Washington, D.C., December 26th. President Roosevelt today was called upon by a group of almost 200 leading interventionists to make certain the defeat of Germany by providing Great Britain with anything and everything needed to win the war. The plea was made in a telegram as Mr. Roosevelt canceled all appointments in order to work on the fireside chat he will deliver to the nation on Sunday night. By the way, you can hear that on my other channel, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. White House Secretary Stephen Early said that the address will be clear and specific on aid to Britain. The interventionists expressed complete approval of the president's scheme to lend or lease armaments to Great Britain and asked him to inform the nation of the consequences to us and to our children's children if Britain falls. Washington, D.C., December 26th. Postal clerks tonight were winding up the vast task of registering and fingerprinting almost 5 million aliens in the United States and its possessions. Under the law designed to enable authorities to keep a closer check on non-citizens today was the registration deadline. Post offices in the larger centers of alien population were ordered kept open until midnight, and clerks were prepared to register all who arrived before that time, even though the job runs far into Friday. Final figures on the result of the 4 months registration campaign will not be available for a week or more, but the total is expected to approach 5 million. William J. Grace, chairman of the Citizens Keep America Out of War Committee, charged last night that the group of interventionists who called upon President Roosevelt in Washington yesterday to provide England with everything needed to win the war are overage destroyers of American government. They ought to be sent to Britain in exchange for nothing because that is what they are worth to the United States, Grace said. No American with any knowledge of the fundamentals of American government or with any love of free representative American institutions, no American with a hatred of dictatorship and with the innate ability that free men have to sense the presence of dictatorship would have sent the Save Britain telegram to the president. Defense orders were topped yesterday by a Washington report that the Navy Department has informed Willys Overland Motors Incorporated Toledo that it proposes to award the automobile company contracts for $6 million in powder and ammunition hoists. This order will increase Willys Overland's armaments backlog to about $18 million including shells and other ordnance parts, reconnaissance trucks, and truck forgings. The company is utilizing a part of its huge automotive manufacturing plant for the defense work. Greeley and Hansen, sanitary engineers, 6 North Michigan Avenue with Metcalf and Eddy, Boston firm, were awarded War Department contracts to plan adequate sewage disposal at 38 scattered new camps. Manila, territory of the Philippine Islands, December 26th. First step in the organization of a Philippine offshore patrol enlisted reserve, officially described as a vital part of the sea defense plans, was taken today by Major General Basilar Valdez, Army Chief of Staff. He announced appointment of 184 seamen from the government cutter service to enlisted and non-commissioned officer grades in the Offshore Patrol Reserve. Washington, D.C., December 26th. The first of a new type of training plane, the AT-8, manufactured by the Cessna Aircraft Company of Wichita, Kansas, has been delivered to the Army, the War Department announced today. It is said to be the first advanced training plane powered with 2 engines and will be used for transition in the student pilots training from single-T twin-engine planes. The AT-8 is a 2-seater powered with Lycoming 280 horsepower 9-cylinder radial engines and has 2 blade constant pitch propellers. It has a wingspan of 41 feet 11 inches and weighs 5,100 pounds. It is a low-wing monoplane with retractable landing gear. Honolulu, territory of Hawaii, December 26th. The loss of 2 sailors in a storm was reported by Captain A.H. Scholes of the Army Transport Edelin on arrival today. The storm struck without warning on December 20th when his ship was about 1,200 miles west of Honolulu, Captain Scholes said. The wind was so terrific it was impossible for anyone to stand on deck. 2 Filipino sailors were killed by the fury of the blast. Only minor damage was done to the Edelin, formerly the Matsonia. Los Angeles, California, December 26th. Testimony of disagreements among heads of the I Am movement was introduced by government attorneys today as the trial of 10 of its leaders on mail fraud charges was resumed in United States District Court. Mrs. Catherine Rogers, who identified herself as a former member of the I Am staff, testified that during an argument between the late Guy W. Ballard, founder of the movement, and his wife, Mrs. Edna W. Ballard in Cleveland, Mrs. Ballard cautioned her husband, "Remember, I am in full authority and you mind your own business." Later in Washington, Mrs. Rogers declared Mrs. Ballard came to the defense of the leader when a student crossed him. Mrs. Ballard said she would slap the face of anyone who dared to doubt Daddy's word, the witness testified. On another occasion in New York, Mrs. Rogers said the Ballards thought that the I Am organist was not 100% obedient to them. Mrs. Ballard called her a snake, a viper, and a crocodile, and said that anyone not 100% obedient was more vicious than any snake, the witness added. Asked by a government attorney whether the Ballards ever admitted they made mistakes, Mrs. Rogers replied, "Oh, no. They said they were perfect human beings and could not err." Mrs. Portia Terry, mother of the divorced wife of Donald Ballard, son of Mr. and Mrs. Guy Ballard, testified she once heard Donald style the I Am work just a fake. She said St. Germain, an ascended master speaking through Guy Ballard on one occasion, resorted to harsh language and told Donald to shut your mouth. Introduced in evidence was a letter to Mrs. Terry from Betty Mundy, one of the defendants, which read in part, "There's going to be no more monkey doodle business around here. We're all getting tough, and God help the member that gives out any leaks about our affairs. If anybody gets tough with us, out they go on their ear. Mama sure gave it to 'em today." Milwaukee, December 26th. Federal Bureau of Investigation agents tonight arrested Eugene J. Burrick, 40 years old, on a charge of having acted as an agent of a foreign government, Germany, without having registered with the Secretary of State as required by federal law. L.V. Boardman, chief Milwaukee FBI agent, said that Burek was a German citizen and had been in the United States for about 15 years. E.J. Kolzer, assistant United States District Attorney, said Burek admitted membership in the Nazi Party. He stated that Burek had acted on behalf of the German consul in Chicago and had claimed to represent the German government. In January 1939, Burek recruited skilled workmen here for work in Germany, and several signed up. While recruiting workers, Burek stated that he was working for an unidentified Chicagoan. Youngstown, Ohio, December 26th. Sheriff Ralph Elser reported Frank Schuster, 41, and his daughter Virginia, 17, were found slain and his son Robert, 19, seriously wounded tonight in their home at nearby Lake Milton. Schuster's wife Gertrude discovered the tragedy upon returning from a holiday trip. Schuster was in the basement, shot to death. Virginia was in her bedroom, hacked with an axe. Robert also had been attacked apparently with an axe. Pontiac, Michigan, December 26th. Municipal Judge Milton Cooney today dismissed charges against Bruce Bragan, 17-year-old high school student who was accused of throwing eggs at Republican presidential candidate Wendell Willkie here on last October 2nd. Leith, Nevada, December 26th. They called the little mongrel dog Bum because he came to the home of Mr. and Mrs. LaVere Wright whining for a handout. He stayed and became fast friends with their 5-year-old daughter, Janine. Today, they're thinking of changing his name. Janine was playing on the railroad tracks. She didn't see a train approaching. Bum grabbed her snowsuit and pulled her from the tracks just in time. Miami, Florida, December 27th. The Coast Guard was searching in pounding seas off Miami Beach early today for the 26-foot charter fishing boat Thrill, missing since yesterday afternoon with 9 persons aboard. 2 Coast Guard vessels were engaged in the search, including one from the Fort Lauderdale base. The vessel left Miami Beach early Thursday and was expected to return in the afternoon. San Francisco, California, December 26th. The Coast Guard here reported today that a boatload of Coast Guardsmen missing since yesterday morning in terrific seas had been rescued. 2 of the 10 men aboard were reported injured. The news was radioed to Coast Guard headquarters from the cutter Shawnee, which, with other craft, had been searching for the 10 missing men. Found Cove lifeboat and surfboat 4 miles west of Fort Bragg, under sail, fuel exhausted, the message said. 2 men injured have taken in tow. Normandy, Texas, December 26th. 3 persons were killed and 2 houses were demolished last night in a small tornado which apparently caused no other damage in this southeast Texas area. The dead were Mr. and Mrs. George Franklin and their daughter Bernice, aged 30. Washington, D.C., December 26th. Asserting that the Justice Department cannot sit by and see the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, ASCAP, and 2 radio broadcasting chains engage in a private war at the expense of the public, Attorney General Robert H. Jackson announced today that criminal proceedings would be instituted against the participants in the battle. The defendants in proceedings under the Sherman Act will be ASCAP, Broadcasters Music Incorporated, the National Broadcasting Company, and the Columbia Broadcasting System. Suit will be brought in Milwaukee, Wisconsin immediately after January 1st. There will be 8 charges, including the illegal poolings of most of the desirable copyrighted music available for radio broadcasting to eliminate competition and to monopolize the supply. The other charges will be 1. Illegal discrimination against users of copyright music, 2. Illegal discrimination against composers who are not members of ASCAP or Broadcast Music Incorporated, 3. Withholding music from publication in order to exact fees not permitted by the copyright laws for illegal price fixing, 5. Restraining composers in their right to bargain for the sale of their own music, 6. Requiring users of music to pay for tunes on programs in which no music is played, 7. Mutual boycott by ASCAP and by the broadcasting chains through Broadcast Music Incorporated in an attempt by each of these conflicting groups to obtain for themselves control over the supply of music by depriving the others of control, which boycotts to restrain and obstruct the rendition over the radio of about 90% of the desirable modern copyright music. Mutual Broadcasting System, the third major chain, has no interest in Broadcast Music Incorporated, although some of the stations affiliated with Mutual have. Jackson said that the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice has been receiving complaints against the activities of ASCAP for a number of years. The original purpose of ASCAP was one which the department recognizes to be legitimate, i.e., collective action to protect its members from piracy of their copyrights, he declared. Hey guys, if you are fascinated by the 1930s and 1940s and love this newspaper channel, maybe you would like my other channel, the World War II radio channel. There we play radio broadcasts from a specific date. I think you will enjoy that channel if you love this one, and don't forget to subscribe to it. And now for local and regional news. More than 4,000 Red Cross Reserve nurses will have been called to active duty with the armed forces by July 1st, Brigadier General Charles H. Bonesteel, commander of the 6th Corps area, asserted yesterday. All nurses now being selected are under 40 years of age. Other qualifications include graduation from an approved school of nursing, state registration, affiliation with the American Nurses Association, and American citizenship. The nurses may be single, widowed, or divorced. An Army nurse is paid $840 yearly, plus maintenance with an additional $40 per month rental allowance when quarters are not provided. Nellie X. Hawkinson, Director of Nursing Education at the University of Chicago and a member of the Subcommittee on Nursing of the National Defense Advisory Committee, said one nurse is required for each 270 conscripts. More than half of the 2,600 men to be inducted into the Army from Cook County next month will be draftees, it was indicated yesterday. The rest will be classed as draft volunteers because they have asked that they be given their year's training at once instead of waiting for their draft numbers to be called. The first 87 men will be inducted from 5 local draft board areas next Friday. Policies on which these 5 boards have determined their deferment decisions indicate that the number of deferments will be higher than expected. An average of 1 man in 6 is being placed in Class 1A, fit and ready for immediate service. On this basis, order numbers up to 1,140 would be called before the 190 men, which the average board will furnish this year, could be approved. 4 of the 5 boards which will provide men next Friday have deferred all married men. Major Roy D. Keene, Jr., commander of Chicago's Black Horse Squadron of the Illinois National Guard, announced yesterday that the 19 officers and 409 men of the squadron will leave by rail next Thursday for Camp Livingston, Louisiana, where they will begin a year's training. The 106th Cavalry Regiment, of which the squadron is a part, was inducted into federal service November 25th and had been expected to go to Camp Livingston immediately afterward, but departure was delayed because the camp was not completed. The 2nd Mechanized Squadron of the regiment, located in Springfield, and the headquarters troop of Urbana went to camp on December 12th. With the Black Horse 1st Squadron next Thursday will go 3 other Chicago units, the Regimental Band and the Veterinary and Medical Sections, and the remaining Urbana unit, the Service Troop. During the last month, the Black Horse Squadron has gone through a preliminary training program in its armory at 230 East Chicago Avenue. Able-bodied workmen are being turned away from the camp enlargement projects at Fort Sheridan and the Great Lakes Naval Training Station at a rate of a dozen a day. I was rejected because I didn't have a union card and because I didn't produce the money with which to buy one. If you aren't a union man, it costs you $42 to join the union and go to work as a common laborer, and you have to lay it on the line. You may be an excellent carpenter, but if you ask for a job without a carpenter's union card, you will find your way barred by a fee of $122. The laborer's job pays $1.10 an hour, and the carpenter's job $1.62 and 1/2. Postmaster Ernest J. Cruchin yesterday announced that 247,217 aliens had registered in Chicago through December 24th. The main post office and 6 branches remained open until midnight last night, the registration deadline. Final figures on the registration will be available today, Cruchin said. So far, the peak day was December 10th when 4,286 aliens registered. The daily average has been 2,470. Delivery of an order of aluminum window frames for a plant under construction in the Clearing Industrial District has been delayed for more than a month because of the reported shortage of aluminum products resulting from the increased activity of the aircraft industry, it was learned yesterday. The new plant at Laverne Avenue and 67th Street is being built for the Johnson Suture Corporation, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, a surgical dressing manufacturer. With the walls and roof completed and the aluminum window frames yet to be received, temporary steel sashes were installed so that the building could be heated for thawing out the ground before pouring the concrete floor. Although construction was reported otherwise to be proceeding on schedule, it was said that the installation of the temporary window sashes resulted in additional expense and trouble. Methods in business education are becoming streamlined. Leaders at the 43rd Annual Convention of the National Commercial Teachers Federation in the Hotel Sherman indicated yesterday. Discussion of modern business study courses, which are designed to turn out efficient students in record time, will concern the 2,000 delegates at the convention for the next 2 days. One of the new methods being demonstrated at the convention is a unique system of shorthand invented by Charles A. Thomas of Menlo Park, California. Based on English phonetics, it does not involve the memorizing of symbols and can be mastered, it was said, in half the time now required for usual shorthand systems taught in high schools. It is also adaptable to the language problems of the new industries arising so rapidly. According to Thomas, an average student can master 80 words of dictation a minute with usual shorthand methods. With his system, the same student can take 120 words a minute, he maintains. Army uniforms for the draftees will be better fitting and longer wearing than the droopy duds passed out to soldiers in the World War, Frank M. Folsom, Executive Vice President of Goldblatt Brothers Incorporated, said yesterday. He returned recently from Washington, D.C. after completing his work as coordinator of textile purchases for the defense program. Folsom said that the purchasing of textiles and clothing under the defense program has been practically completed for the current fiscal year. Contracts moved smoothly through his department with a minimum of red tape, he said. Plant expansion of 3 Chicago area industrial corporations involving a total expenditure of $3 million was announced yesterday. One of the new plants is indirectly the result of the federal defense program. The Ingalls-Shepard division of Wyman Gordon Company, one of the world's largest makers of steel forgings, much of which is used in defense activities, has started work on in addition to its Harvey plant, which it is understood will increase the working force by about 500 men. The company now employs 1,000. Completion of the new unit is scheduled for next July. Designed by R.H. Maviti, an engineer, the plant expansion will cost about $150,000, with equipment costing more than $1 million contemplated. A warning that the way to preserve liberty is to prevent governmental control of the family was given yesterday by Professor Ernest R. Groves of the University of North Carolina. He spoke in the Stevens Hotel at the annual meeting of the National Conference on Family Relations. Declaring that the dictator cannot hope to maintain his system unless he can reach into the family itself, Professor Groves said that the 3 major steps taken by totalitarian states in regard to home life are, number 1, invasion of family privacy by legislative restraints and the creation of such fear within the home that a man is afraid to even think. Number 2, standardization of the family, since individuality and originality are a menace to totalitarianism. And number 3, removal of the child from the home influence and his molding to as great a degree as possible by state-controlled youth organizations. This makes the child an increasingly docile member of the state. Bloomington, Illinois, December 26th. Governor John Stell will deliver the major address next Sunday at the dedication of the new bridge on Route 66 between Chenoa and Pontiac in honor of Jimmy Cox, state fiscal supervisor who was killed near the site, it was announced today. John M. O'Connor, a business agent of the Milk Wagon Drivers Union, was found guilty yesterday on a charge of assault and battery and was fined the limit of $100 and costs and given a verbal lashing by Justice of the Peace James K. Calhoun of Glencoe. The testimony here shows you engaged in a brutal and cowardly attack, declared the magistrate. There is no room in Union labor or in New Trier Township for such a man. It is regrettable that the law does not allow me to assess a larger penalty. O'Connor was arrested December 10th and accused of leading a gang in Winnetka that beat and severely injured August Van Deel, a driver for the Cream Crest Farms Dairy of Skokie. It was alleged that the assault was part of a concerted campaign against vandalism against Cream Crest. The union controls 4,500 drivers in Chicago and the suburbs. Another driver, Lyle Dye, was slugged and the tires of several company trucks were punctured the same day. A few days ago, the concern signed a union contract. Reports of wholesale attempts at intimidation of members of the Bartenders Union brought a retort yesterday from Austin Steves, progressive candidate for union president. In a letter sent to members, Steves pleaded with them to knock out the forces that for the last 7 years have been bleeding you and bringing you disgrace to you and members of your union. Members of Local 278, don't be intimidated, the letter said. Show Chicago and the nation that you have the courage to exercise that precious American right to vote. Steves said he prepared the letter, which was signed by his running mates on the progressive ticket, after he had received reports that Chicago bartenders were receiving instructions on how to vote. This drive of intimidation was seen as a last-minute effort by Frank the Enforcer Nitti and Hoodlum Associates to keep their hold on the union. Complaints of irregularities in handling divorce cases in the city courts of Calumet City and Chicago Heights were being investigated by the Chicago Bar Association yesterday. The Bar Association was informed that these courts are quick and easy places to get divorces. The law clarifying the powers of the two courts to grant divorce decrees became effective July 1, 1939. Since then, according to reports made yesterday, at least 1,000 divorce cases have been started in the two courts, and the clerks have collected fees of more than $20,000. 80% are out-of-town cases. The little-known city ban on barbed wire, which has interfered with government requirements in a large defense contract, has been violated by the city itself, it was discovered yesterday. Around the new water filtration plant at 78th Street and the lake is an 8-foot fence topped by 3 strands of barbed wire. Loran D. Gayton, city engineer, said the contractor was directed to erect the fence to protect valuable pumps. He said such fences had been used on other occasions at city construction sites. The anti-barbed wire regulation was called to public attention when police halted construction of a fence around a plant at 5301 Southwestern Avenue. The Federal Bureau of Identification ordered that such a fence be built after the plant received subcontracts worth $8 million from naval engine makers. H.I. Allen, attorney for the company, which has the contract for the fence, said an effort probably would be made to get special permission to proceed or to have the building code amended. Herman F. Steibeck, night manager for the Pullman Company at the LaSalle Street station, was recovering in St. Luke's Hospital yesterday from knife cuts on the head and throat suffered in a scuffle Christmas night with a colored porter at the railroad station. The porter, George E. Butts, 214 East Garfield Boulevard, is under arrest. Steibeck, who is 45 and lives at 2834 North Richmond Street, charged that Butts attacked him after being ordered off duty for drinking. Two inmates of the St. Charles School for Boys at St. Charles who escaped Sunday night by scaling the institution's $23,000 fence were captured near Oregon, Wisconsin, and returned to Illinois last night. To Sheriff Edward Fisher at Oregon, they confessed they had stole 4 automobiles in their flight and had wrecked one of them. News of the escape brought from State Senator Thomas P. Gunning, Republican Princeton, a demand that the barrier be reconstructed to make it impossible for the youths at the institution to get away and terrorize the countryside in the Fox River Valley, as has happened often in the past. Senator Gunning was chairman of a committee that recommended the construction of the fence. Joseph Balliman, 44 years old, of New York City, who hoped to marry Wilma Gainey, age 16, of Safford, Arizona, with whom he had planned a rendezvous in Chicago last week, was freed by Judge George L. Calici in the South State Street Court yesterday on a disorderly conduct charge. Detectives met the Gainey girl when she arrived from Arizona, and Balliman subsequently was arrested. She has been sent home to Arizona. Bernhard Jant, 41 years old, of Milwaukee, was driving home from Chicago yesterday with his mother and 2 sisters-in-law, also of Milwaukee, when their automobile stalled on the tracks of the Northwestern Railroad at Harlem Avenue near Avondale Avenue. At that moment, an empty passenger train pushed by a locomotive was backing toward them. Jant leaped out, opened the doors of his car, and pulled the 3 women to safety. 15 seconds later, the train hit the car and ground it to pieces. A divorcee was found dead yesterday in the hotel room of a reputed World War flyer at 1244 North Dearborn Street in what police said was the aftermath of a Christmas drinking party. She was Miss Gladys Benson, 38 years old, a stenographer. Hotel employees found her body after breaking into the room of H.C. Bert Alexander, 45, not far from her room on the same floor. She had been dead 24 hours, Detective Eugene Kalusta of the Hudson Avenue station said. Miss Benson's body was unclad and in bed, police said. Alexander, partially clad, was sitting next to her. Police said he was too stupefied with liquor to be questioned. Empty whiskey bottles littered the room. There also were 2 empty bottles which had contained sedatives. Police reported Miss Benson died probably of a combination of sedatives and alcohol. A card in her purse asked that Ferdinand L. Metz, a clothing designer, be notified in case of accident. Miss Benson was divorced in 1938. Alexander came to Chicago from Los Angeles last month. He described himself at the time as a World War aviator and test pilot. 4 months ago, Roy W. Morris, 45 years old, of Joliet, was injured in a railroad accident and was taken to the Oak Forest Infirmary for treatment. Yesterday, he was discharged and less than 2 hours later was fatally hurt when he was struck by a Rock Island suburban train at 140th Street and the village of Robbins. He died last night in the infirmary. Lieutenant Fred Mulhausen of the County Highway Police at Homeward said that when his men reached the scene of the accident, the train had gone on and Morris was lying beside the tracks unattended. The lieutenant added that he had been informed by Coroner A.L. Brody that the crew would be required to appear at an inquest to be held in the infirmary today. Authorities were conducting an investigation last night into the fire that wrecked the 5-story building at 178 West Randolph Street during the early morning rush hour yesterday and did $75,000 damage. Dense smoke combined with a low fog blanketed the west section of the downtown area, tied up traffic, and caused thousands of employees to be late for work. Fire Commissioner Michael J. Corrigan said he had heard that certain employees in the building had tried to put out the fire before turning in an alarm. The resultant delay permitted the fire to gain headway, he said, and the causes behind it are to be looked into. Police were studying reports that Jaime Loudmouth Levin operated a handbook in the building. The street level of the building was flanked by a BG restaurant on one side and Thompson restaurant on the other. The BG system also maintained experimental kitchens on the 4th and 5th floors. 25 employees of the kitchens and scores of patrons of both restaurants were routed by the fire. The building was owned until October 15th by William R. O'Toole, former alderman of the 14th Ward. Christmas mail poured in and out of Chicago this year at a pace of 7% faster than that of last year, Postmaster Ernest J. Crutzen reported yesterday. Peter, the squirrel that adopted the Edward Sarla family back in 1936, had just finished his 5th holiday season with his patient hosts. The Sarlas lived at 317 Berry Avenue when Peter discovered more than 4 years ago that a long leap from his favorite beau would land him beside the Sarella breakfast table, which was always good for a handout. Peter made himself at home and even brought in his wife, Minnie. Peter and Minnie spent 4 winters in and around the apartment, appearing with the first frost, and in the spring, leaving for wherever squirrels spend their summers. Since last winter, the Sorellas have moved to 325 Wellington Avenue, a block away. They didn't expect to see Peter this winter, but Peter found them and on Christmas Day gave himself a package of the Sorellas cigarettes. He apparently has had wife trouble, Sorella said, because Minnie isn't with him anymore. Hey guys, if you are fascinated by the 1930s and 1940s and love this newspaper channel, maybe you would like my other channel, the World War II radio channel. There we play radio broadcasts from a specific date. I think you will enjoy that channel if you love this one, and don't forget to subscribe to it. And in sports, New York, December 26th. The Illinois basketball team set another record tonight in Madison Square Garden by shooting 18 free throws without a miss while beating Manhattan College 56-40. 8 of the Illinois players took part in the record-breaking event, which broke a mark of 14 held by New York University. 2 years ago, Pick Daner of Illinois set a new Garden individual scoring mark of 25 points while Illinois defeated Manhattan 60-41. Illinois never has met defeat in Madison Square Garden. DePaul's unbeaten basketball team will attempt to gain its 7th consecutive victory tonight, and Loyola will try to improve on its 500% rating in the second doubleheader of the season in the Coliseum. Loyola will oppose Yale at 8:15 o'clock in the first game. DePaul will meet Butler in the second game. Yale opened its road trip with a victory over Washington University in St. Louis Monday night and suffered its first loss of the season on Wednesday against Bradley Tech at Peoria. Butler has gained an even break in 4 games against Big Ten Conference teams, beating Ohio State and Northwestern and losing to Indiana and Michigan. In the first doubleheader in the Coliseum, December 16th, DePaul defeated UCLA and Loyola lost to Georgetown. Berkeley, California, December 26th. The University of California shot into the lead in the last 2 minutes to defeat Nebraska 30-24 in a basketball game tonight. 2 substitutes, Thurston Davis, a forward, and Gordon Garrettson, a guard, sank a pair of baskets to put California ahead. Don Fitz, Nebraska guard, was high scorer with 10 points, all made on long shots. Montreal, Quebec, December 26th. The Chicago Blackhawks are convinced now that 2 hockey games on successive nights are too many. After playing a 3-all tie with the Rangers in New York last night, the Chicagoans ran into the Canadiens here tonight and were beaten 7-5 on a combination of their own wariness and a brilliant shooting of the home team. Montreal climbed into a 6th-place tie with the New York Americans as a result of the victory. The wary Hawks will meet the Red Wings in Detroit on Sunday, then will head for home to battle the same club in the Chicago Stadium on New Year's night. Cleveland, Ohio, December 26th. Howard Chappell, junior tackle today, was declared ineligible to play for the Western Reserve University in the New Year's Day Sun Bowl game in El Paso, Texas. The ruling by Dr. Robert E. Bates, Dean of Students at Western Reserve's Adelbert College, left the Red Cats only 3 able-bodied tackles for the contest with Arizona State. Dr. Bates ruled Chappell, who offered to make the trip, ceased to be a student when he left Cleveland Thanksgiving Day to enter the Army Air Service at Parks Air College, East St. Louis, Illinois. Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, December 26th. The skies turned wet and gray today for the Boston College Eagles, who had to practice indoors while their 250-pound tackle, Johnny Yuckos, went to bed with an ulcerated tooth, a bad cold, and a mild fever. Rain washed out Coach Frank Leahy's plans for a 2-hour outdoor practice session to whip his squad into shape for the Sugar Bowl game with Tennessee. He sent his charges through dummy scrimmage, an extra set of calisthenics, and signal drill in a high school gymnasium, and then held secret practice. Yuckos, one of the strong points of the Boston line for the last 2 years, was the first casualty since the Eagles arrived here a week ago. Los Angeles, California, December 26th. 3 football teams competed with Saturday's opening at Santa Anita for a place in the athletic spotlight here today as Stanford moved into the neighborhood to share some sunshine with the world champion Chicago Bears and the National League All-Stars. Clark Shaughnessy brought his Pacific Coast champions into nearby Pasadena to complete preparations for their date with Nebraska in the Rose Bowl New Year's Day. The Indians, unbeaten and untied, held light workouts in Brookside Park where the White Sox do their spring training. The National League All-Stars finally finding a field that was not too muddy engaged in a 3-hour defensive drill against the Bears' man-in-motion offense, firmly convinced they will be able to hold the champions to fewer than 73 points when they meet in the 3rd annual pro football game in Gilmore Stadium on Sunday. Boston, Massachusetts, December 26th. Eddie Miller, the National League's best fielding shortstop today, signed his 1941 contract for President Bob Quinn of the Boston Bees and then headed for Orlando, Florida with his family. Miller, who remained unsigned last season until after his arrival at the training camp, probably received a big salary boost, but neither he nor Quinn would discuss terms. And that is sports, and that is the news, as read from the Chicago Tribune for Friday, December 27th, 1940. Have a swell evening. Hey guys, don't forget, if you enjoy 1940s pop culture, radio, movie serials, some film, and the number one song of the week, and maybe some other music, check out my other channel, the World War II radio channel. It is elsewhere on YouTube, and we go along with the corresponding dates that you are hearing in the newspaper. So if you want to get some pop culture from the date that you have just heard, go to that channel and subscribe and click on the bell icon so you will know when those videos are out. And those are pretty lengthy. You will enjoy them. I guarantee it.